Welcome to Innovation Day 2023, presented by Connect. We've got such an incredible array of things happening here, supporting the life sci and tech communities in San Diego.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse Geip. I'm the PAC South Director for the National Security Innovation Network, which is part of the Defense Innovation Unit. We are a DoD command that focuses on dual-use defense tech with a variety of different military applications. And I'm joined today with two phenomenal panelists who are going to talk a little bit about the defense tech market, what some of the defense investors are seeing in the dual-use space. San Diego, as we just heard, is a great life science and biotech town. But if you look on the backside of Petco Park, out into the water, you'll see a lot of large gray ships. And those aren't related to biotech. Those are related to the U.S. Navy. And we have a massive U.S. Navy and Marine Corps presence here. And San Diego has long been an aerospace, defense, and tech community. So hopefully today, you all will get to learn a little bit about what some is happening in the defense investor space and some of the new technologies that the DoD is looking at. So with that, I want to introduce Kerry and Larsen to do a little self-intro for themselves, and then I got a couple questions to walk through about what we're seeing in the dual-use space. Kerry.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. My name is Kerry Chin, and I work for Booz Allen Hamilton. For those of you who are not familiar with Booz Allen, we are one of the largest systems integrators for the federal market within the U.S. My personal role is I run our tech scouting team, which is focused on bringing dual-use technologies into the federal government. And I also run the AI vertical for our Booz Allen Fund, which we just launched last year. A little context around the Booz Allen Fund, because I know it's a little new. We are a $100 million fund over 5 years. Pure strategic, so what that means is we're very hyper-focused on adding value for any company that we invest in. Our main focus areas are AI, cyber, defense technologies, which includes JADC2, C3, and a lot of other technologies there, as well as deep tech, which encompasses pretty much everything, including the moonshot ideas. So that includes AR, VR, space, quantum, and a lot of other technologies.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Larsen Jensen. I'm the founder of a small venture capital firm called Harpoon Ventures. We have about $300 million under management over the past 5 years, and our mandate is to invest in early-stage technology businesses, and ideally, many of those companies are dual-use in nature. Our view of the world is that most enterprise technologies, ranging from infrastructure to cybersecurity to AI/ML, and also deep tech, are applicable in the government market. We just observed through our time in Silicon Valley that most people didn't realize that they were. And so we set out on a mission to invest in them and support them in that journey and open up a new market opportunity for them. So far, I think it's been punctuated by some successes and failures, both from an investment standpoint and from a go-to-market standpoint. And so we're really excited to be here and to have the conversation today.
Well, and Larsen, you failed to mention that your office is sort of close to where we are today. You may want to point it out.
It is. Well, hopefully there's no criminals in the crowd, but our office is down here just past the outfield in the brick building in Gallagher Square. So really lucky to have that spot.
Yeah, well, and we're glad to have a defense tech VC here in San Diego. So great to have you in the neighborhood. So the first question I have for you, Larsen, when you're talking to your portfolio companies, what advice do you give founders when coaching them about how to target DoD within their life cycle? We're a unique customer in the government.
Yeah,
we spend a lot of money, but we spend it in unique ways. So, and I think not all startups necessarily understand that when they see the DoD has a $780 billion plus budget to spend annually, that doesn't necessarily mean checks are flowing readily and easily. But love to know how you talk to them through that process.
Unfortunately, I could probably ramble on about this for a longer time than we have, but it's definitely been an evolution in our own thought process and in the broader market's thought process. When we launched our fund about 5 years ago, I think there was one other pseudo-investment firm called InQtel who had any emphasis in trying to invest in companies and bring them to government customers. And we modeled a lot of our value proposition off the things we thought that they did right and got right. And I can't tell you the number of times that we were laughed out of the room with this value proposition back in like the 2016 timeframe, because it was viewed as a market that was lumpy, hard to access, and unpredictable. And they're right in many cases. But what we saw was this rising tailwind of innovation here in the United States for the public sector, broadly speaking, largely because of the drivers of what's going on overseas in China. And so we read the tea leaves a little bit. There's plenty of people who are much smarter than us that sort of set these policies into motion, and we were just observant to listen to them and started a firm that was really predicated on that thesis that things would change and that there would be new innovation channels, new customer channels for startups to access that previously weren't available to early stage companies. Fortunately, I think that we were right, and I think that did happen. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that have been gating items for success for companies to reach wider scale adoption in the market have remained barriers to entry, i.e. the Valley of Death, which I'd love to get your thoughts on. So many, many more innovation channels, front doors, DIUs here, other organizations are here today, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. But unfortunately, I think that transition period from something that's a good idea and solves problems for a small subset of users really hasn't reached a time and space where we can scale that across a wider swath of users in the government space efficiently. There's outliers. Venture capital is a game of outliers. But nevertheless, if we're going to do a better job as a country and as a citizenry, we need to improve on that process. And so our advice has sort of followed suit. Originally, when we started, most venture investors would say, don't invest in gov tech or defense tech because you can't predict the sales cycles. We said, well, that's mostly true, but not necessarily, and we see some things changing. Now, over the past year and a half since Russia-Ukraine, there's been a lot of people going in here, and I frankly think a lot of people are going to lose their shorts because I don't think that they have the experience and the scar tissue to realize that getting a proof of concept is not a recurring revenue business. And so I think it's important to have that dialogue and understand those challenges of breaking into government. So our advice, in our view now, is similar to what it was about 5 years ago. Get your half a dozen or so early adopter customers in the enterprise. And then ultimately, once you have a stable cushion of revenue where your business is not at risk of going bankrupt, we can start to experiment with other markets. Hopefully the government market is one of those, because I think it's our patriotic duty to support our government customers. But it does come with challenges.
I actually want to interject right there because I fully agree with what you just said there, Larsen. Even as Booz Allen and even as, a Prime, we also advise the exact same thing. You have to diversify your portfolio. You should probably not start with the government sector as your first customer if you want a stable business that you can rely on.
Yeah, piggybacking on that for a second, since you mentioned it, I think it's just very difficult if you're building a dual-use technology, something that, in other words, is applicable in multiple different markets. Dual use is the term that the DoD likes to use, and I think it's a great one for something that's applicable in traditional private sector commercial markets as well as the government market. In other words, these are technologies that are pervasive in terms of their impact across financial institutions, healthcare, what have you, like AI platforms that could transcend all markets. But I think the challenge is when you're working with one of your first customers as a government customer, they most often have needs and considerations that do not align with other customers in other markets. They likely have a different technology infrastructure. They have compliance constraints that are unique to that vertical. And as a small organization, you need to make those trade-offs in terms of resourcing the business. There's exceptions to be sure. And if you can capitalize yourself enough where you can go for it and not really worry about it, that's one thing. But if you're resource constrained, have raised a few $1,000,000, maybe even up to 10, it's really hard to find product market fit in the enterprise. It's a Herculean task independently there. It's doubly so if you add on the challenge of the government market in the early days.
Well, it sounds, as much as I was hoping you would say that we've become a perfect buyer as the DoD, it seems like there's still a use case for the Defense Innovation Unit since our purpose for being is that we've acknowledged the fact that there is tremendous investment happening in the commercial market in technology areas where there is significant national security interest. and that we as the government can benefit from the investments that customers of these different technologies are making in those products and become another customer. And yes, we have different requirements and use cases that may shape the product at some level, but instead of thinking that everything has to be designed first and foremost as a government product first and exclusively, that there's a lot of benefit of us riding on the coattails of other successful commercial technologies, and then figuring out how to help those companies navigate our ecosystem, since really what we want them to be good at is building that product, not necessarily being experts in government acquisition. So,
to be fair, like, I think you guys have done a fantastic job, and so I just want to go on the record and say that. And to be honest,
it's a big problem.
It is an issue. Like, our organization wouldn't exist likely if DIU didn't exist, like, and didn't start happening. I think it's all, probably all of us, the ventures team at Booz, are sort of like beneficiaries of this tailwind and acknowledgement that there is change occurring. I think it's also just practical to acknowledge, like, where we are in sort of that wave. Like, where are we? I still think that we're in the early days of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of, it's easy to look at the acquisition system in the DoD and point fingers, but these were built around lessons learned over generations, and it takes time to change those systems. And so we're seeing a lot of willingness from across the government to think differently, to behave differently. We're seeing authorities coming through for Congress to enable that. And we're also seeing companies knocking on our door that didn't in the past. So I'm going to go to my next question here, Kerry, and this one's for you first. Booz Allen is one of the largest defense contractors in the country. Why have you recently established such a robust corporate investment arm? And can you speak about the types of capabilities that you see most interest in from your government customers that are helping to shape that investment strategy?
Yeah, happy to. And I think we read the exact same tea leaves. Maybe we read from the same cup, Larsen, because we started our tech scouting team right around the same time that you started your firm. And the reason we did is because we saw the exact same trends. We saw DIU standing up a lot of innovation and initiatives to work with dual-use technologies. We saw InQtel doing a lot more investments and having the actual traction and initiative there. And all of that culminated into us starting our tech scouting team, again, to attempt to bridge the gap for the Valley of Death. I can't say that it's an easy process. I can't even say that we're necessarily fully successful. But what we have done is we've been able to gather a lot of the hardest mission challenges that we've seen within the federal government. And then we've been able to look out into the commercial market to see what dual-use technologies there are out there. And then we put them all together. We put the right stakeholders into the same room together with the expectation that we're able to find some kind of common ground, find a way forward. And one of the largest benefits of Booz Allen is because we are a large systems integrator, we have a lot of large contracts that we can house a lot of these small businesses, and in fact, we're incentivized to do so. What that means is that we can create opportunities for, I wouldn't say immediate revenue, but much more immediate revenue than otherwise, where you can become a teaming partner and we can immediately start prototyping and envisioning what integration and mass production looks like. And what happened through that process is as we were doing tech scouting, we very quickly realized that we can do so much more. We can do more than partner. We can actually invest in these companies. And what comes along with that is we're able to put very concerted focus on specific companies that we think will move the needle for the federal government, whether it's for the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or anybody else. What we can do is we can collate those problems, figure out which ones have commonalities, identify the right kinds of solutions, and then figure out what's actually out there 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out, and start helping these companies shape their products and their requirements such that we can eventually just literally drag and drop some of these solutions into the government space. So that's really where we decided, hey, ventures is a great idea. We can invest in these companies. We can be hyper-focused on solving very specific challenges. And in fact, we have the ability to help with the scaling. One of the biggest shortfalls with a small business trying to operate in the defense market is, one, they don't understand the market. Navigating the acquisition process is nearly impossible because there are just so many layers of bureaucracy. In addition to not understanding the core systems, right? So how exactly does the defense system work in the Army, for example? How do we do that integration? And then finally, how do we actually augment a lot of that with the necessary services aspect, the labor aspect, to actually make it scale, to make it pervasive across the various agencies? And that's really where we see Booz Allen being able to support.
And can you, Kerry, talk a little bit more about the specific technologies that you tend to be focusing on? I know you have an emphasis on AI.
Yes.
But where do you see the biggest opportunities for small businesses in particular to become integrated with some of these larger weapon systems that Booz Allen helps manage?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, like I mentioned, our focus areas are AI, cyber, defense tech, and deep tech. I'm just going to go through them systematically. So, within the AI space, I would say it's pretty much anything you can possibly imagine. We're talking about data labeling, we're looking at computer vision, we're looking at, one of our recent investments, Credo AI, is focused on responsible AI and ethical AI. And that's something that, honestly, the government hasn't necessarily put as much emphasis on, mainly because that there are a lot of regulatory aspects that need to get put into place before it actually gains traction. But we as Booz Allen believe that we need to be ethical. So what we're doing is we're investing ahead of time so that we can help with driving a lot of those requirements, and so we can ensure that everything that we that we release as Booz Allen from an AI perspective is ethical and is highly responsible and traceable. So that's AI. Cyber is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but actually Booz Allen is one of the largest cyber providers. And we have a team called Dark Labs that's hyper-focused just on delivering cyber solutions. So we have immense talent here. We also have immense knowledge on exactly what's going on in that space. And if you're tracking anything, whether it's the conflict in Ukraine or the US-China relations and the tension there or anything else, cyber is just pervasive across the board. So we invest extremely heavily there. Defense tech is one that I think will be a little bit more challenging to comment on, but in terms of accessibility for the dual use market, things like RF signal transmissions, counter UAS, and a lot of those solutions are the ones that we're looking at. And then finally, deep tech. Like I mentioned before, we're looking for moonshot ideas there. We're looking for things that we can put into space. Earlier, I heard a panel about how stem cells actually age a lot faster when they're in space. Those are things that we would like to explore. I don't know necessarily that we would invest immediately, but if we're able to find the right kinds of strategic fit and we're able to find, immediate pathways to government clients, then that would be an area that we would invest in as well. And again, some other areas within deep tech, we have quantum, we have AR/VR, we have human performance, specifically as it relates to a soldier and how we can enhance their performance out in the field, among other areas.
Yeah, thank you, Kerry. The government customer is a big market, and there's a lot of things that we need. You listed a lot of them. One of the comments I'd make too is that from a government standpoint, when we're looking at some of these technologies that have come to the government, some of them in response because they've seen what's happening in Ukraine and they think they have a capability that the national security ecosystem could use, and then they show up at the government door and we look at their cap table, and there's investors in that cap table that cause concern for the U.S. government. And that's honestly something that a lot of businesses are not thinking about early on because they're focused on raising funds that can sustain them and to be successful. But if you unfortunately end up on a cap table situation where there are investors involved that the U.S. government would later look back on and say that this creates risk to us, that your IP has been accessed by those that we may have concerns about, that can actually undo your ability to get government contracts in the future. So I think having investors like Booz Allen and Harpoon who understand the market, who are trying to make strategic investments that ultimately deliver value to your portfolios, but also have a sense of ensuring that your cap tables are structured in such a way that the government can leverage those capabilities in the future is a huge asset to the U.S. government. So this question is for you both, and we got about 10 minutes left here. So what would you say to your fellow investors about what is changing with the DoD that presents new opportunities for early stage dual use companies? Are there funding pathways that are genuinely moving faster? And are we actually becoming easier to work with? You kind of already addressed this, Larsen, but I'll give you another crack at it, maybe highlighting the things that we're doing well this time.
I think
but it's up to you.
As with everything, it depends. Like, it's sort of the non-answer answer, but it depends. I think there's many areas where absolutely you are. I think DIU is doing a great job. I think even many traditional pathways are doing a great job, frankly, of bringing innovation in the door. But to my prior point, that valley of death still exists, and I think is sort of an unsolved problem for new entrants. And new entrants, generally speaking, companies that are half a dozen years old, they're not capitalized well enough to go after a $100 million or $1 billion program. They're just not resourced well enough to do so. And so it's really, really hard. I think one of the advantages that the traditional defense primes, Booz Allen included, has is that they can pursue multiple billion-dollar contracts and take a portfolio approach to go to market. And if they win one of those, it's a very good thing. Startups can't pursue multiple billion-dollar contracts, let alone one. So they're at an inherent disadvantage. I think one of the areas that I think is most interesting to pursue the government first is in the areas of deep tech or frontier tech. The government is shown to be a fantastic customer of those areas because, frankly, regular industry is just not evolved to adopt them yet. Areas like autonomy is a great example. Many different space systems are a great example where the government can deploy meaningful slugs of capital, and you can monitor where that's coming from congressionally down into the programs to know those budgets and their availability. There's no large-scale autonomy budget that you can trace at any enterprise. It's really challenging, but you can trace that with the United States government. And so I think the devil's in the details, the type of technology, the type of go-to-market motion, the TRL level of the company, all of these things impact it. But I do think there's very much early inning signs of success, but I still think we are very much in those early innings.
Yeah, I mean, I would generally agree with you, Larsen. I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen here is that there's been a shift from us, when I say yes, I actually mean the federal customers, so maybe you, Jesse, but we're shifting from pursuing technologies to pursuing solving specific challenges. And that's where we're actually making a major impact, or at least that's where I'm seeing the impact. So whether it's Jensen, DIU, SoftWorks, AFWorks, Army SIPR, the focus has shifted from, hey, I want to get an AI solution to, hey, I want to help monitor, I want to find a counter UAS solution that can find our adversaries' drones when they hit our airspace. So it's something so incredibly specific that now we can actually solve for something that's meaningful. And what that does is it makes it a little trickier for a dual-use technology or a commercial business to say, hey, I have an exact solution. But what we can do there now is we can take a lot of these potential solutions, vet them, understand exactly which ones actually have the right potential, and then move them forward through the process to recognize that there is no such thing as a drag-and-drop solution. You're going to have to work on integration. There is going to be a heavy labor component to it to actually get it to work, but that it is actually possible. And I think that's really where we've actually transitioned significantly in the past decade. And so with that being said, I do think that, again, Valley of Death is still there, but I am very cautiously optimistic about it.
That's great. Larsen, thanks for making a baseball analogy while we're here today as well. And I think that there's the point about us as a customer trying to communicate a problem that we're trying to solve as opposed to making a very requirements-driven approach where we say, we want a thing that can do this specific capability, and then we'll buy the lowest cost version of that. it is a bit of a mindset shift across the government, and and the truth is we're ultimately looking to solve problems. How is something that we're, I think, increasingly willing to be surprised by, and that maybe we think that a solution to track something is, a satellite system, but someone has a very novel approach that's different than what we're thinking. And if that capability does meet the mission, that's what matters more than our perceived initial approach of what that capability should be. And so I think you see more of that mindset coming through the contracts, and it's great to see that. But I agree with you that that integration piece is a very challenging thing for an initial startup to own that entire solution. Even if they have a great capability that fits very strategically somewhere into solving that complex problem, it's highly unlikely that their technology solves the whole problem and that we're going to buy it and deploy it to solve that thing. It's going to have to integrate with some other system that's likely owned by someone who's a prime, whether that's Booz Allen or Raytheon or Boeing or Lockheed or somebody else. And so knowing how to navigate that ecosystem is a true skill in becoming successful in this market.
That's exactly it. And one more comment I wanted to make off of what Larsen mentioned. It's true that small businesses probably are unable to pursue those billion-dollar bids. But what does happen is larger defense primes go after it, and 1% of $1 billion is still a lot of money. And so by creating teaming partners or teaming with the right kinds of primes and going after those contracts, there's still a lot of potential there.
All right, so one last question, and we're going to bring this one home to current events a little bit. We've all been tracking what's been happening in Russia and Ukraine and the really total war situation that Ukraine is in. There have been lots of stories written about the impact of commercial technologies on the battlefield. Certainly Starlink is brought up constantly as a key enabling technology that is being used across Ukraine, one for just people to maintain access to internet for all the things that you would need, but also for battlefield implications. While there were certainly government investments in some of the key capabilities that ultimately led to Starlink, Starlink is not a government system. It's a commercially operated product. And there's a lot happening with small FPV drones doing a lot of work on the battlefield, and a variety of other commercial technologies. What lessons are you taking away from what we're seeing in that conflict about what it means for the impact of commercial technology to potential future conflicts, and how is that, in your mind, shaping where you're thinking about making investments for the future?
I guess we won't both jump at this one at the same time. I guess, bluntly, it's not for us at all. Period.
Can you elaborate as to why?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen things that are like, hey, look at what this is doing in Ukraine. Like when you think about investing in a company, you want to see a large addressable market and durable customer base, not people who don't have budget. And yeah, so I mean, it's basically, I would say, somewhat uninvestable.
Yeah, I think that what we've seen in the conflict in Ukraine is that there is a lot of propensity for low-cost solutions, dual-use solutions that can be applied in the defense space, and that's really my takeaway from it. It's not so much about, I would tend to agree with you that the specific examples that we're thinking of might not necessarily be investable, but it does show that we don't have to necessarily rely on just the aircrafts, the tanks, the airships to really fight in a lot of these conflicts anymore. There are a lot of smaller, more modular, low-cost solutions that we can use in a lot of these situations.
I guess to put a finer point on it, I think that at any point in any of our conflicts, there's intricacies that make things appropriate for a certain point in time. I think the counter-IED market during my time in the service was very important. Like, it was something that was very important for that point in time. But thankfully, we're not fighting in that theater forever, and that threat vector for us is no longer important to our troops, or much less important. We should have the capability in our back pocket, but on a day-to-day basis, it's not something we're thinking about. I think sort of our view of this is that things that are applicable on the battlefield in Ukraine hopefully, are not things that endure over time to be a long-term, durable market opportunity. And more along the lines of what Kerry was saying, just recreational things that are being repurposed to be, airborne offensive, weapons or defensive weapons. And so I think really hard to build a company or invest in a company that exists for a discrete one point in time without sort of a longer tail to it where it could, do $100 million in annual sales a decade from now.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you both. We're at time here, so I would say I think that from a DoD perspective, and I don't represent the interest of the entire Department of Defense here. I think there's a lot of things that we're trying to take away as there in any conflict scenario about how to get capability that meets the specific environment that you're in fast, right? And there are different tools to do that. And I think from the DIU thesis of commercial technology having an ability to have an impact on the battlefield, from our standpoint, maybe there's some confirmation bias there, but we're certainly seeing commercial technology used on the battlefield in a way that's shaping the environment. And that, to us, is a signal about the fact that whether it's those specific capabilities or not that matter to the U.S. government in the long run, that we need to be thinking hard about how to be a better customer so that we know where those capabilities are. But thank you both. I want to end on this, but Kerry, Larsen, appreciate you so much for being here in San Diego with us today. Larsen, I know you didn't have to travel very far to be here, but for those who are in the audience with us, thank you for listening to us today, and for those who are thinking about tempting the government market, despite all the challenges that we face, the mission matters, and there are real opportunities. But we wanted to have an honest conversation about the fact that those opportunities don't just fall out of trees easily. You got to work at them, and the government market is not the same market when you're working with the DoD as other markets that you're used to. And so hopefully, if you're looking to raise a round, you're thinking about trusted partners like these and others who really have our national security interests in mind. But with that, please help me in thanking Larsen and Kerry for being here today, and appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
I really feel passionate about sharing the San Diego talent, elevating San Diego, because it is the best place to be an entrepreneur.